Verona è l'arena, c'è anche Romeo e Giulietta, arriva il Giro d'Italia, van tutti in bicicletta, e la cronometro a squadre, che meraviglia! Sembra che i corridori ballano la quadriglia.
We are listening to the cycling podcast at the Giro d'Italia in association with Rapha. Today we are in Canazei.
Kotse citere kotse, kotse vicine, nu spigude shikora, nu spigude shikora. Kotse citere kotse, kotse vicine, nu spigude shikora, se lu mangiano le femmine.
È un corridore e tutto pepecore, indovinalo un po' tu. È un fatto strano, è proprio un italiano, è Dino Zandegu. La maglia rosa, nessuno sa se poi la indosserà, solo a Milano c'è chi la veste e chi la sognerà.
Hello, my name's Richard Moore. I'm with Daniel Friebe.
Hello, Richard.
And Daniel, would you like to explain how we were played in there?
Well, we were serenaded, weren't we? Because last night we were lucky enough to be, we were in a fantastic locanda. We could do a whole podcast on the difference between a trattoria, osteria, locanda, ristorante, pizzeria, so forth and so forth. We're not going to do that. We found ourselves sitting, well, we were in a very esteemed company, weren't we? Because Maurizio Fondrist, who's the 89 world champion.
No,
88 world champion. The race actually went through his home village, Cles, today. Anyway, he was in the restaurant, but so at the next table to us was...
He looks like a butcher's dog, doesn't he?
He does.
Incredibly fit.
Almost literally. And at the next table was Dino Zandegu. Dino Zandegu, 1967 Tour of Flanders winner, one of the great characters from the history of cycling. He was a great contributor.
Also, one of the great characters in your biography of Eddie Merckx.
He was, and he had some great stories, and he told me at the time that he had some fantastic stories about Eddie Merckx, and they became even better after about 2 o'clock in the afternoon, insinuating that he maybe liked a glass of wine with his lunch. And he seemed on very sober form last night. He was enjoying the local produce, shall we say, but he was very sober, and of course he loves to sing, and I think we heard a montage there of various compositions.
He needed very little encouragement.
He needed very little encouragement. He's got a fantastic voice. We heard him singing there about Nibali, about the Giro d'Italia. There was a song I think he came up with to do with a team time trial in Verona, and it was thoroughly entertaining, wasn't it?
It was. We secretly recorded him.
He wouldn't mind.
He wouldn't mind. In fact, we secretly recorded him deliberately because you felt that if we asked him, that we might not have got him to stop. He does like
and
to
he's also feeling
perform.
slightly aggrieved because he used to sing pretty much every day on Rai television, Italian state television at the Giro, but he's been kind of snubbed this year, and I believe that he went on today to sing his latest hit on Nibali, but otherwise...
When you say hit?
Yeah.
You mean number, really?
I think they're excellent. Anyway, Rich.
He's got a great voice. I looked him up. He's born in 1940, so that makes him, 77? Actually, not quite. His birthday is next week, a week today. He'll be 77. He won 4 stages at the Giro as well, 6, 6, 6, 7. Tell us, before we get on with today's stage, tell us the best story about him, which was...
No, Dina, I would have to refresh my memory, Rich, but I do remember a story which, to me, it sounded like one of those 4 o'clock in the afternoon stories to me, that he beat Eddie Merckx for I can't remember whether it was in a criterium or a small one-day race. Anyway, Merckx was so angry that
there was a prize of wine or something, was there not?
I think it was, yeah.
There
I think it was a crate of wine.
A huge bounty of wine.
Yeah, and Zandegu was so fearful of the wrath of Merckx that he turned off down a country lane shortly after the finish line, found the nearest house that he could hide in. I think he opened the door, allegedly, of the house, went upstairs, found an old lady sleeping.
Sang to her.
Sleeping. No, and I think he said, "Oh, sorry, madam, but Eddie Merckx is chasing me, and he's a beast, or he's a monster, he's going to kill me." And and I can't really remember what the postscript was. I don't think Merckx ever found him. I seriously doubt any of it ever happened. But there it is in black and white in one of my books.
Well, great character and wonderful to be played in by him into tonight's episode. I say myself and Her Royal Highness, Her Majesty Daniel Friebe.
Where's this come from?
It's just your aversion to any matters relating to the toilet makes you a bit like the Queen.
Anyone would think, Richard, that we didn't have anything to say.
Well, we've been talking a lot though about the fallout, if you'll pardon the expression, from Tom Dumoulin's incident, and we'll talk a little bit about that in part 2. Part 1, we'll discuss the wonderful victory for Cannondale-Drapac, second World Tour win in about a week, having gone 2 years without one.
It's a deluge now, isn't it? We're inundated with Cannondale-Drapac.
You watch them, will not be able to
win.
They'll not be able to stop themselves winning now. But anyway, the tale of the Tapa, I'm going to keep this very, very brief.
Victory diarrhea, isn't it? Anyway.
So, stage 17, Tirano to Canazei, 219 kilometres, over 3 categorised, climbed right from the start this morning. A lot of teams warming up on turbo trainers, although Movistar, who arrived very late at the start, set out all their turbo trainers in ominous fashion, and then when the riders appeared, they didn't have time to get on the turbo trainers, so they just went straight to sign-on. So that was for display only. But teams were warming up, and it went straight up. A lot of people keen to get in the break, obviously, and a huge group formed. Two riders off the front, Matej Mohoric and Pavel Brut, who eventually blew up quite spectacularly, and Mohoric carried on his own for a while, but he was absorbed by a group that at one point was about 40 riders. We spent most of the day in the car. It was about a 4.5-hour, 5-hour drive from the start to finish today, so didn't see a lot of the race. Tried to watch as much of it as we could on the Eurosport player.
Yes, and one of the benefits was that every time we got stuck behind the publicity caravan, which was fairly regularly, we got out and had a chat with the blueberry farmer, Ivan Basso, otherwise known to Giro, our great friend Giro, as the Lighthouse. Interesting theories, Basso, interesting ideas about yesterday and whether Movistar should have waited, Bahrain should have mated. He was in the definite no camp, as were most people we spoke to today.
The only person who's not in that camp, who's a sort of figure in the cycling world, if you like, is Sean Yates, who was adamant that they should have stopped. Everybody else, I think everybody we spoke to this morning was adamant that they shouldn't have waited more than they actually did. Anyway, we'll get onto that in part 2. Ivan Basso has some interesting ideas about sideburns as well. Very elaborate side lappets he's cultivating there, as well as the blueberries. But anyway, tail of the Tapa. So huge group formed, and at the end of it, Pierre Rolland won the stage. That's the tail of the
Where
Tapa.
did he attack,
No,
Richard?
okay. So there were attacks. Valerio Conti looked very strong. Gorka Izagirre was in the stage as well, his bogeyman from a previous stage where Conti, of course, fell off, having also looked the strongest in that stage. And once again, he played his hand too early and with too much conviction. He advertised to everybody that he was the strongest in the group, or he looked certainly one of the strongest in the group. He went too early, on his own with about 12 kilometres to go. Pierre Rolland was also following a lot, obviously felt strong. He had a teammate, Michael Woods, in that group. He attacked about 7.5 kilometres to go. It was a tough old finish. It was quite a drag up to the finish, really. Hard roads. But the group was perhaps maybe just too big behind, and there was no real chase. Rolland held on for a famous victory and a quite emotional win.
Yeah, it was one of those typical situations where as soon as one rider sort of flew the, what's the expression? Flew the coop.
Flew the nest.
Flew the nest. What's the thing? What's the one about the coop? That's a very strange English expression.
Yeah.
Anyway, as soon as one rider got away and got a decent gap, there was always going to be a lot of looking around, a lot of confusion about who could chase, and a lot of dissension in the ranks, and that proved to be the case, didn't it? And like you say, Rich, Conti, well, he hasn't really distinguished himself as far as racecraft is concerned on this Giro. He's a very, very strong rider. I mean, I mentioned him, I remember early in the Giro, as someone who I thought would probably get a stage win at some point, because I think he's very much on the up. as far as, well, his career's concerned. He struggled for a couple of years, was a real prodigy of Italian cycling, but he's certainly very strong. I think he maybe lacks a bit of a speciality at the moment. He's what the French would call a baroudeur. He's more of an escape artist at the moment. But yeah, he wasn't very smart, was he?
No. I just didn't see. We were talking about this, about the luck that's involved in going at the right time, and there is a bit of luck. And Rolland, having a teammate there is also extremely valuable. And I should have mentioned, of course, Jan Palance was in that group too, and that added another little dimension to today's racing, because he was a threat overall. At one point, it was a virtual pink jersey. He was also threatening the white jersey of Best Young Rider, which saw Quick Step chasing, because the lead at one point was 13-14 minutes, I think, as much as that. And so Quick Step were chasing to defend Bob Jungels' white jersey. And we were one of the interesting subplots in the race, I suppose, is there's quite a competition for the white jersey. Adam Yates is up there, Davide Formolo. In fact, I stopped Formolo as he crossed the line. He'd obviously heard that his teammate Rolland had won the stage, and he was the last Cannondale rider to win a World Tour race before Talansky's win at the Tour of California last week. So here's what Formolo had to say. You have a stage win. You hear what was happening on the radio?
Yeah, happy for Pierre and happy for the team. It's all the Giro, we are always close. Last year in Vuelta 2, finally riding a nice victory.
After your win here 2 years ago.
Yeah, exactly. It's nice, really nice for the team to back in. So now we have still a few important stages in the front to stay calm. It's really nice to try this victory.
There's a battle going on as well for the white jersey. That was a factor today. How much of a target is that for you?
I don't know. I just do my best, and then we will see in the end.
What's your feeling? I mean, there's still along some really tough stages to go.
Yeah, exactly. I think we had the hardest stage in the front, so we just stay calm. Everything can happen. So we just stay calm, try to relax and enjoy.
How are you feeling?
Well, at the moment not so bad, but every day it can be different.
So that was Davide Formolo, who's obviously flying high overall and fighting for the white jersey, riding pretty well.
Very coveted at
he
the
is,
moment.
Isn't he?
Richard, he's on the
contract,
market,
isn't he?
Astana are very, very interested. A lot of confusion, a lot of uncertainty about whether Fabio Aru's whether they're gonna find an agreement. Aru's agent's asking for a lot of money, around about 3 million euros, and you would imagine, well, certainly Astana would be able to pick up Formula for a lot less than that. Cannondale want to keep him. Sky are looking at him as well. You look around. I saw Andrew McQuaid, the rider agent, at the start this morning. He said there was very little movement in the transfer market. They always say that. Agents always say that. It's also quite early, isn't it, I suppose? But you look around at some of the teams, and UAE being one of them, there are some talents out there that would really, Bob Jungels as well, another rider out of contract, another very coveted rider. I think Jungels, the fate of Jungels will determine a lot of what goes on between a few big teams. If Jungels stays at Quick-Step and they certainly want to keep him, then I think Sky is certainly interested in Jungels, Astana are interested in Jungels, and they'll have to look elsewhere. So, I think a lot of other riders' destinies might be tied to Jungels. Anyway, back to Cannondale. A fantastic victory for Rolland. He's been trying hard for this, really, last year at the Tour as well. Remember, he was, had a lot of bad luck there, a lot of crashes, but kept fighting. And he's got his reward today. You saw Charly Wegelius at the finish, didn't you, Daniel? I did. Spot of jousting with him. No. I saw him after the finish line. He was shaking with excitement, exhilaration, emotion, and not every day he meets Her Majesty. No, and funnily enough, in the morning, where were we in the morning? In Tirano, he talked about Movistar's tactics yesterday, and he didn't quite understand them. And he also talked about how this clamour for teams to slow down when Dumoulin did what he had to do. And he said, I don't really understand cycling anymore. There's so much stuff going on that just seems ludicrous to me, or just escapes my understanding. So I put it to him that he obviously did understand something about cycling. You said this morning that you don't understand anything about cycling anymore. You're obviously wrong.
Yeah, that was intense, to say the least, I have to say, because already Pierre was with the 3 riders, and we had to make a decision about what to do then. And then, as you saw, with a group of 40 riders in the last week of the Giro, everybody's playing a cagey game, and the group was splitting and re-splitting, and like Pierre took some risks, like twice he was almost out of the race by just being conservative and saving energy, And then after the climb there, after the Traguardo Volante, they were, we knew the race would be different, and they didn't miss any of the splits. And then we made a plan for the final, and they did it exactly how we wanted to do it. And he was really strong, I have to say. So.
And Mike played a fantastic role there, blocking and breaking the rhythm of the group.
Yeah, I mean, I'm always saying how green Mike is, that he needs to learn about racecraft and so on, but apparently I'm also wrong about that, because he really carried off that final like an old fox, so he was crucial to the win.
And just lastly, Charlie, I mean, people like me and the media, we've been harping on about the team's lack of World Tour wins for a few months. Does this feel a bit like you've been vindicated?
I don't feel any sense of vindication, because I don't think that we were doing anything wrong in the first place. And, I said that when I was asked about it in the spring, and I say exactly the same thing now. We work in a really good way in our team. We work on young riders, and we work on developing them, and Mike Woods is an example of that. And of course, you have to wait for wins sometimes, but we didn't change the way we worked, no matter what people like you were writing. And I think the whole group really deserves satisfaction from days like today.
Hi, it's Ronny Lauke, the team manager of the Canyon SRAM racing team, and you are listening to the cycling podcast in association with Rapha. I ride because it's nice to be outside, to enjoy the nature, to enjoy the freedom that a bicycle can give you. What I like about Rapha is they changed the game of cycling gear. They brought coolness to cycling gear. They brought a quality to an exceptional better level, and they're a pretty cool brand.
The Rapha Cycling Club is the largest global community of its kind. Members share their passion for the road through rides, events, exclusive club kits and racing. Find out more at rapha.cc.
Thank you very much indeed to our wonderful sponsor, Rapha. We heard there from Ronny Lauke, the German manager of the Canyon SRAM team, trying to use a different little clip for every episode this year. I'm not going to manage that. In fact, there's one that I want to use again this Giro, Stefano the barista. We're going to hear from him again during this Giro. But thank you very much indeed to Rapha. They're fantastic sponsors, and they help us to be here. Without them, we wouldn't be here. We heard before the break there from Charly Wegelius, and I think before we move on to Tom Dumoulin and the fallout from his unfortunate incident yesterday, you want to say a bit about Pierre Rolland, Daniel?
Well, it's not been plain sailing for him at Cannondale, has it? He went there at the start of last year, start of 2016, amid all sorts of promises or hopes about how his career was going to completely change course, because we thought, and everyone thinks, that the culture in French teams is very different from the culture that he was going to find at Cannondale. There was a lot of talk of him, doing real work on his time trialling for the first time, and I think Jonathan Vos has talked about maybe changing the way, even his cadence and things of that nature. And what we've actually seen and what we've actually got has been really more of the same of what we had seen from Pierre Rolland, a rider who produces brilliant performances in flickers every now and again. And he's done well at the Giro before. I think he thrives at the Giro. He likes the history and the romance of the race, but he also is someone who I'm not sure he succumbs to the pressure at the Tour de France, but he's certainly under a lot of pressure at the Tour de France. There's a lot of attention. You go to any Tour de France start, and there are a lot of fans there just for Pierre Rolland, or mainly for Pierre Rolland. And he's made a real effort at Cannondale. He's really immersed himself. He's learned English, and I think he deserves a lot of credit for that, because there aren't that many French riders who go abroad and step out of their comfort zone, and he really did by going to Cannondale. So I think today's win was partly just reward for that.
He turns a big old gear, doesn't he, Pierre Rolland? He's really churning away, but he's always been like that. That was one thing that Jonathan Vos, who coaches him now, said he was going to address, but that's just the way he rides. He's got a very distinctive style, Rolland. A lot of people nominating him today as Peddler de Charme, and we're doing that again this week. We've had so far Omar Filey was the winner last week. Lucas Postelberger, if you can remember that far back, he was the winner in week 1. So we're looking for candidates for week 3. We will be running a poll from tomorrow, Thursday. So far, favourites are Rolland, Dumoulin, Nibali,
and
Filippo Pozzato.
Pozzato for not complaining once.
Yeah.
I've seen him a couple of times the last few days, and he said, he said to me, "Have you noticed I've not complained once about anything?" He's making a real effort not to complain. I think he would. There are a lot of things that he would like to complain about this year. Possibly the length of the stages, possibly some of the finishing circuits, but he hasn't. He's said nothing. He's just taken a lot of pictures. and
had
got
his picture,
no breaks.
had his picture taken a lot. Well, listen, let's the fallout from the Dumoulin, roadside escapade yesterday.
Do we have to talk about this again?
It's going to be like Chris Froome running up Mont Ventoux last year. It's going to be one of the defining images of the race, which is odd because we don't have any actual images of it, but it's seared into our imaginations, I think, and just the drama of it and the fact it's so unusual to see that, which is in itself unusual because, as you say, Daniel, the stage has been very long. Another long one today, but yesterday was very long indeed, 6.5 hours, 7.5 hours for some guys. To really get into the nitty gritty of this and to understand what's involved, I had a little conversation this morning at the start with Nigel Mitchell, who for many years was a nutritionist at Team Sky, moved to Cannondale-Drapac. I think last year was his first year with that team. So I thought I'd ask him about this aspect of being a bike racer, how you manage your bodily functions. And here's Nigel Mitchell. Nigel, the issue we saw with Dumoulin having to stop to do a number 2. Well, we don't see that very often in cycling.
Yeah, but actually, Richard, if you think about it, in a very long stage like that, with the amount of food that people are eating on the bike, then it's something that can happen. In effect, you're creating faecal mass. And especially if you had a high fibre breakfast and you've had a lot of bars on the bike, you've got a lot of fibre there. So all you're doing is just creating a load of poo in effect. So actually, it's quite understandable.
It's understandable, but why don't we see other riders have that issue?
Some riders have had that issue, and some riders over 200k do have some problems there. But a lot of the foods that people have on the bike, your body digests and absorbs it all. They're what we call low residue. And a lot of riders, when they're doing these big stages, then they cut down on the amount of fibre that they have before, so it reduces the risk of having to do that number 2.
So there are things that you can do to at least reduce the risk of it happening.
Just having on those long days, having lower fibre foods for breakfast and lower fibre foods on the bike, like the rice cakes, which has now become really popular. When we first started developing those, that was for one of those reasons, because basically you digest and absorb pretty much all of it, so it doesn't put extra pressure on the bowel.
Because I think when we saw Tom Dumoulin stop and do that, a lot of people jumped to the conclusion, he's unwell. My thought was not that he's necessarily unwell, he just needed to go.
Yeah, exactly, that's right. That's what my thoughts were. If he were really unwell, he wouldn't have been able to carry on riding like he would do it. That's what it looked like to me.
So that was Nigel Mitchell, refreshingly sort of straight talking, not like talking about this issue with Daniel at all, who skirts around it. Sorry, Daniel, are you struggling to hear me? Are you struggling to hear me, or are you pretending not to hear me because you don't like talking about this?
We're in a very noisy restaurant.
This subject.
We're in a very noisy restaurant. No, I mean the key takeaway from today was that Tom Dumoulin, well, he seems to be in pretty good health. I mean, I heard a few murmurings that Movistar Bahrain should have tested him a little bit more at the start of today's stage. There was the climb to the Aprica pass at the very start of today's stage, and that was the reason why so many teams were warming up. But I think Bahrain tried to just have a look and force the pace a little bit, and he seems to be responding okay. So after that, the peloton settled into a fairly leisurely rhythm, didn't it? And we've had a bit more clarity today about what might have caused the problems. the ineffable problems.
The fact that he had to go to the toilet.
Yes, those problems. And excess consumption of sugar, something that I've often accused Lionel of. It seems to be that he took on too many gels. I mean, there's obviously a lot of... It's not every day that pro riders have to... Well, it was, 5,000 metres of climbing, over 5,000 metres of climbing, 230 kilometres, 220 kilometres. So I think there was a lot of thought that went into feeding yesterday and making sure they took on enough fluids and enough sugars and so forth. And it seems as though Dumoulin might have gone over the top slightly on that. But just on Sunweb, Rich, I think you got the vibe from them at the finish that they're not really relishing the next couple of days.
We've talked a lot about the team, and there's a huge responsibility on their shoulders. Obviously, today was another
they're young and experienced shoulders in a lot of cases.
Yeah, and today was another hard day, and these are long days in the saddle. And I remember at the equivalent point of the Giro last year, we're going to see Georg Preidler and presenting him with a Peddler de Charme t-shirt, and he was in great spirits. He was really enjoying the Giro. He was getting into breaks. He had a lot of freedom. Contrast that with his demeanour at the finish today, where he's got a job to do, a very specific job with a lot of, as I say, responsibility and therefore pressure. And I spoke to Chad Haga and Georg Preidler at the finish. Here they are, Haga and Preidler. Another hard day today. These are long days, aren't they?
Long day, yeah. Not as hard as yesterday.
What was there a bit of an inquest last night to what happened to Tom? It wasn't illness or anything, just an emergency situation.
Yeah, just a lot of stress and a lot of sugar in his stomach, I guess, something.
How was he last night? Was he down, or was he quite up for?
He was a little bit downtrodden, I guess might be the word, but he's bounced back mentally, and we saw even with that he was extremely strong.
So no concerns about him physically at all?
No.
And mentally he seems to be somebody who's very up for the fight as well.
Mm-hmm. This is what we came for, so we're ready.
And another few hard days for you guys.
For everybody.
How was today after yesterday's drama? Today was another long, hard day, obviously.
Yeah, it was a really tough day, and we were controlling it in the beginning, and it worked out well with one guy in the breakaway, like Geschke, and afterwards we just started to chase easy, and then picking up the speed till the final.
How was Tom after yesterday? Is he somebody who is back to sort of full physical strength that you could see today? Was he back to his usual self?
Yeah. I think already after the stage he needed a moment to rethink, and then today it was good again.
And do you think? I mean, a lot of people thinking the balance has swung in favour of Quintana now with such tough stages still to come. Are you still confident that Tom can hold on?
Yeah, for sure. I think if you look at yesterday's last climb, where he started and where he finished, then I think the other guys should actually be scared.
How much does it take out of you guys as a team riding the way that you're having to ride, to defend, to control the race to some extent, to chase and just to look after Tom as well?
Yeah, it's pretty tough. I mean, we have a good team for it, but still we're not used to do that in other races always, so it's pretty tough.
The Cycling Podcast is supported by Science in Sport.
Hello, my name is James Morton. I'm the head of nutrition for Team Sky. I'm also a reader in exercise metabolism at Liverpool John Moores University, and last but not least, the world-class knowledge director for Science in Sport. Well, the whole most important thing about supplements, prior to even thinking about contamination, is assessing the need for a supplement. If you can't get it in sufficient quantities in your diet, and if there is evidence to support the use of it to improve performance, then of course you can experiment with supplements. The contamination issue is really a minefield. In the UK, there's an independent company called Informed Sport. And so to the average man on the street, what you would do is you would look for a supplement on the shelf that carries the Informed Sport logo. But unfortunately, only several weeks ago, there was a company that had the Informed Sport logo on the side of their tub, but actually hadn't been Informed Sport certified at all. And so it's becoming increasingly worrying for the average man on the street and for the elite athlete, actually. The best way to overcome this issue is to work with reputable companies and to really do your research on the company. And that's why at Team Sky we work with Science in Sport, because these guys will test all of the raw ingredients that come into the factory. So they know exactly what ingredients are going into their products. They will also test the outgoing product from the factory. And last but not least, they'll test products that are actually on the shelves in shops. And so for us, that's gold standard industry best practice. So we can rest easy at night knowing that our riders really are adhering to best practice products, if you like.
I'm Stephen Moon, I'm the Chief Executive of Science in Sport. The issue of trust is central to Science in Sport as a brand, actually. We do consumer research a couple of times a year to try and stay close to cyclists and athletes in general. And when asked to describe what Science in Sport is all about, the word that comes at the top of the list every time is trust. Closely followed by integrity, and then closely followed by innovation. So that's what we're known for. Probably the biggest reason we're known for in the arena of trust is our approach to banned substances. So we've got the most rigorous banned substance testing regime in the nutrition industry in the world, actually. And we've spent a lot of time and money over the years, and we upgrade it each year to ensure that we're the best in the business. And it costs us a lot of money, and we're happy to spend that money, because without that level of trust behind the brand, well, we're just another nutrition brand then. We're quite unusual, and if you look at pretty much all nutrition brands, in fact I think all of the nutrition brands contract out a lot of the manufacturing, so they know where they're being made, but they're not making them themselves. We, as a strategic initiative, own our own factory, and that does one very important thing for us. We can control the supply chain and manufacture the product from end to end. Now, you'll find that the very best in the industry will take each batch of finished product made and they'll test it for banned substances. And because we've got our own factory, we can go much, much further than that. So what we will do is we will test for banned substances every raw material that arrives at the factory. We'll test every batch of finished product that we make at the beginning, middle and end. We'll swab the factory to test for any contaminants which may have come in by airborne or other means. And we go even further than that, in that we go upstream to all our raw material suppliers, audit their premises, audit their systems. So we've got a complete end-to-end approach to testing banned substances, which is unparalleled in the world, actually.
The Cycling Podcast is supported by Science in Sport. Science in Sport, fueled by science.
Yes, thank you very much indeed to Science in Sport. We heard a little bit about the lengths they go to avoid contamination in their products. Just don't overdo it on the gels, as Tom Dumoulin maybe did, but the gels are very handy.
Bob Youngles occasionally overdoes it on the gel of a different
Yeah, that's
kind.
different. I don't think he's got caffeine gel in his hair, or maybe he does, I don't know. A reminder of the competition that Science and Sport are running in conjunction with the Cycling Podcast, as well as the 20% off offer for all listeners to the podcast. If you go to sciencesport.com and enter the code CPOD20, you'll get 20% off. But they're running a competition as well to win an incredible prize bundle worth £5,000. The first place prize winner will receive Can't Buy Anywhere limited edition Oakley Giro glasses, the ones that are supplied only to the pro riders. Also a Wahoo kicker, a home trainer, a year's supply of Science and Sport and Muck-Off product, and a signed Team Sky 2017 jersey. There are also second and third place prizes worth £1,000 and £500 up for grabs. Go to scienceandsport.com/the cycling podcast, not as Lionel said // just scienceandsport.com/the cycling podcast. Good luck. So we heard a little bit earlier from Chad Haga and Georg Preidler, and I said, Daniel, that the difference in demeanour was quite striking in Preidler in particular. These guys were we were speaking just beyond the finish line. They just literally stopped riding their bikes, but they were tired and weary and you know, it's not probably a lot of fun, but only however many more days, three more really hard days, I guess. But this week, and you know, we've seen the general classification shake up a little bit this week. We've seen certain riders like Vincenzo Nibali really come to the fore, but this is what this Giro was always supposed to be about. It's about this final week. The whole point of this Giro has been that the riders trying to win it would come to the front in the final week and start performing now. And also the whole point was to hide as much as possible in the previous 2 weeks.
Yeah, and we all expect Quintana to get stronger in the third week, as he always does. We learned today or last night that he's still suffering slightly from the crash he had at the weekend on Sunday, wasn't it, on the stage to Bergamo, which seemed pretty innocuous at the time, but that was certainly one excuse or one reason offered up by Movistar yesterday for him not appearing more sprightly on the Stelvio. But Quintana, I think, will get stronger. Sunweb are obviously, they're hoping that their leader Dumoulin isn't exposed. It might be though, Rich, that we thought at the time that the crash on the Stacer Blockhouse with Thomas and Landa would have a big impact on the general classification, in the sense that it deprived the race of two leading contenders. But I think it may also have a big impact in that it deprived Dumoulin of the rider who would have been his key lieutenant, and that was Wilco Kelderman. He would have been the guy who probably could have lived with the Quintanas and the Nibelis and the Pozzovivos and so forth, and he might well have been in groups on the mountains when they were only down to 10 or even 8 or 7. So I think Sunweb will really miss him over the next couple of days.
Yeah. Perhaps also, I imagine I was away for the Blockhouse stage, so I missed the stage that effectively knocked out Team Sky with Geraint Thomas and Mikel Landa. But I imagined, I did sort of imagine that had that not happened, that Landa could have finished with Quintana and Thomas might have finished with Dumoulin. Thomas might also have been a kind of ally for Dumoulin, because I could have imagined those two being at a similar level in the mountains. And we said we were going to talk about the fallout from the Dumoulin incident. I mean, we haven't talked so much about the etiquette and whether, the other riders and teams did the right thing. Another thing that occurred to me was that had they really waited and riders who'd been dropped got back on, the race was happening up the road with Kreuzwick and co, but there were also riders who'd been dropped and a few Movistars in particular. Had they come back to the group, that also might have altered what played out on the mountain. So there were lots of reasons for the race not to stop completely, and I think Dumoulin himself recognises that the right thing happened.
Yeah, and just thinking about his team or lack of strength in his team, he is a guy who is not only very well liked and increasingly well liked by the public, I think he's also well liked in the peloton, and I think Sunweb are generally well liked in the peloton. I think they've been able to count on allies on a few occasions in this Giro when you've thought, well, maybe other teams could have looked at Sunweb and say, you've got the leader in the race, you do all the work. But no, they've had a bit of help, and I think that's indicative of the fact that there is quite a lot of sympathy and goodwill towards them, and you never know at what particular point in the next 3 days Dumoulin is going to need help. But there probably will be a point where he is isolated and he needs help. And it might just be that at that point, Bauke Mollema's there and Bauke Mollema's out of general classification. They still get on very well, or other riders at Trek or other riders at Lotto, Jumbo, NL. And that could also be a factor. And Movistar they're a very self-contained unit. They're the only Spanish World Tour team now, and there have been various incidents over the past couple of years when other teams have been upset with them, and Quintana, certainly we heard earlier in the Giro from people like Giovanni Visconti, former teammate, who talks about how Quintana himself is a bit of an island, doesn't interact with a lot of other people in the peloton, so it might be harder for them to pull in favours, and that might be a factor.
Well, we're in the Dolomites, Daniel, and we've got a Dolomite stage tomorrow.
The Dolomite police can have a day off tomorrow, because
we are actually in the Dolomites.
No one can mistakenly claim that we're sorry, that I've got a breadstick stuck in my throat. No one can mistakenly claim that we're in the Dolomites tomorrow.
Because we are in the Dolomites. What's going to happen tomorrow?
Well, should we ask the king of the Dolomites?
Yeah.
Let's ask Gilberto Simoni, winner of the Giro d'Italia in, when was it, Rich? 2001 and 2003. hails from the Dolomites, 2001, 2003. Yeah, hails from the Dolomites. Giro d'Italia, they called him. Here he is speaking at the finish today in Canazei.
Togliendo le macchine, potendo andare in bici, questo è il paradiso delle bici, perché vabbè.
If you take the cars away, the Dolomites really are cycling paradise. You've got incredible mountains just waiting for you to take them on, and any common mortal, or at least common cyclist, can take them on. It's a place for everyone to come to and savour. The 3 stages coming now are really tough, and we've got 3 riders who could all win, in my opinion. It's a chess game from here on in. Any move they make could win them the race or lose it for them. Maybe for this reason, I think we'll see a waiting game for a bit longer, a sort out on the final climbs, unless something unexpected happens like with Dumoulin yesterday. It may come down to a climbing battle between Nibali and Quintana, or if the 3 of them watch each other, I think it might all work out in Dumoulin's favour. We also have to see how the teams are going to ride. I haven't seen any great teams up until now. Quintana's is maybe the only one who could take control. If they want to force the others' hands, they should do it on the Pinei tomorrow. They need to at least try.
So that was Gilberto Simoni. Daniel, interesting thoughts about the Dolomites stage tomorrow. I don't know if you're able to speak at the moment because you've just filled your mouth again with breadstick, but any thoughts that you have on tomorrow's stage?
No, I mean, it's an interesting profile. The climb that really caught my eye was the Passo di Pinei, which is not a climb we know particularly well. The others, the Pordoi, the Valparola and the Gardena, are kind of classics, Dolomite classics. Most of the riders in the field will know them. And the Pinei is less well known. It's short, but the descent off the Pinei is long. And then, of course, we've got the climb up to Ortisei, which is not severe, but that is where the key action is going to take place. And, it's going to be interesting in light of what happened on the Stelvio, on the descent of the Stelvio, to see what Nibali does and how he... Well, to see really whether Nibali feels that he needs tomorrow's stage to gain time, and whether tomorrow's stage is an opportunity for him to gain more time on Quintana and Dumoulin, or whether he's going to be content to consolidate tomorrow. I would suggest that tomorrow is the key stage for Nibali, because we've got summit finishes at Piancavallo and Asiago on the penultimate day. Again, it's pretty much a summit finish, so there are no more descents where he can obviously attack and gain time. So I think tomorrow could be a key one for him. Watch out for the Char. A key one also if he's going to try and win Preidler de Charme, because the pole will be running tomorrow evening. So that's an extra incentive for Vincenzo Nibali. Anyway, let's leave it there, Daniel. We'll be back tomorrow night. Thank you very much. Let's have dinner. Thank you, Rich.
A reminder that you can watch the Giro d'Italia live and exclusive on Eurosport and Eurosport Player. UK viewers can also watch highlights of each stage at 10 p.m. on free-to-air channel Quest. There's a special offer for the Eurosport Player, £29.99 for an all-access pass for the rest of 2017. Details of availability, compatible devices and full terms and conditions can be found on the Eurosport Player website, uk.eurosportplayer.com. You've been listening to the Cycling Podcast in association with Rapha. Thanks to them and thanks to our other sponsors, Science and Sport and Maserati, and to All Press Espresso for supporting our morning show, Kilometre Zero. The music in this episode is by Amara Terra. Thanks to them. Thanks to those who help keep us on the road, in particular David Luxon, Jonathan Rowe, Nick Christian and Simon Gill. And thanks to Tom Wally, who produced this episode.